The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
We need a revolution. There's only one solution. I need somebody to show me the love. We need a revolution.
Welcome to Informed Life Radio on 1150 AM KKNW and streaming to CHD TV, Rumble, and other platforms. Thank you for taking your time to tune in today. I'm your guest host, Lisa Templeton, standing in for Bernadette Pager. This hour of free speech radio is made possible by Informed Choice Washington. It is our dedicated donors who keep this program on the air. And if you derive value from the information and for our other efforts protecting medical freedom here in Washington through advocacy and education, please support us with a financial gift. It costs money to run this show, to host rallies and testify in Olympia, to table at conferences, to run a website and email platform. And so we invite you to become a stakeholder in our work. Go to informedchoicewa.org and click donate. And another easy way to support us is to always start your Amazon shopping from the link at our homepage at informedchoicewa.org. This will give us a small commission at no extra cost to you. We're not encouraging more shopping, just asking you to use the link when you do. Thank you for supporting our small but mighty nonprofit. The views expressed today are not necessarily those of KKNW or CHD, and the information provided is not intended to be medical or legal advice. And also, Informed Choice Washington does not endorse candidates or political parties. The purpose of today's interview is so that listeners can hear directly from a candidate about his positions. So Jerrod Sessler, known as America's Engineer, is a candidate for Washington's 4th Congressional District. As a stage 4 cancer survivor, defying 5% odds through determination and a whole foods approach, he advocates self-reliance and health freedom. Jerrod served in the Navy and lives on his ranch in Prosser with his wife of 30 years, Nikki. They have 3 children who they homeschooled. And he's a serial entrepreneur and former NASCAR driver with 2 engineering degrees. And he applies precision and boldness to his approach to challenges. He's the author of the bestseller, How We Broke America, A Checklist to Fix It. And he delivers practical solutions like the Congressional Accountability Act. So I'd like to say welcome to Jerrod Sessler.
Thank you, Lisa, and hello to all the listeners. Happy to be here. Hope we have a lively hour discussion here. We got a lot of things to cover.
Yes, we do, and it always goes so quickly. So tell us, first of all, where is Congressional District 4?
So it's the 4th District of Washington State. There's 10 congressional districts in Washington. 2 of those are in eastern Washington. The 5th, which is along the border of the state with Idaho, and then the 4th, which I am in, which is also known as Central Washington, that goes from Canada to Oregon, just on the east side of the Cascades. So it covers about 8 counties. All are part of 8 counties here in eastern Washington.
Okay, thank you. And I happen to know that my hometown of Yakima lies within the 4th, but I didn't realize it went all the way from Canada to Oregon. I should look at a map sometime, shouldn't I?
A big district, and it takes about 7 hours to drive from top to bottom, and trust me, I know.
I bet you've been putting a lot of miles on the car.
Yeah, a lot of miles.
Well, tell us, I mentioned in the intro about your stage 4 cancer diagnosis in 1999. Do you want to tell us what happened there?
Yeah, so at the time I was driving race cars, and I was 29 years old, and actually about a year and a half prior to that, I had gone in to get a physical for racing, and I had this mole on my back. It was irregular shaped, itchy, discolored, and irregular colored. It was really telltale melanoma, but the doctor wasn't really concerned about it. And so then a year and a half later, I was often backing up to corners of walls to kind of scratch the spot on my back that was between my shoulder blade and my spine, and it was really not something I could reach, and so I was always scratching at it. And my mom is a nurse for about 40 years, and she made an appointment with a dermatologist. We went and saw him, and it turned out, long story short, it was stage 4 metastasized melanoma. It had had time to grow in depth and then spread to my lymph system. And so they basically gave me a 5% chance of living. And that's kind of when I really started making changes in my life. I refused conventional medical treatment and found some great organizations and some great teaching and just took my own path. And now here we are 26 years later, and I feel like RFK Jr. Is taking us, with this Maha movement, is taking us down a very similar path to what I did, and I couldn't be more excited for our country.
Great. What prompted you to diverge from the path of the allopathic medicine at that time? And was that a new path for you, especially having grown up with your mom as a nurse?
Yeah, it was a new path for me. It was interesting because my mom always was kind of the healthy one, at least that's what we thought. And certainly she cared and tried, and we certainly tried to eat a lot of good stuff and everything. But really, for me, the decision to not take the allopathic path and go more of a naturopathic, self-led path was just the percentages. They just didn't look good. They basically gave me about a 15% chance, even if I did the conventional medical process and treatments. And I just wanted a better chance than that. And I just really felt led by God to take a more natural approach and to, really rein in my diet, which I don't think was really horrible, but it certainly wasn't one that, lended itself to being healthy. At the time, I was almost 220 pounds, and I'm about 6 feet tall. So, I was overweight. I probably, some may not consider me to have been fat, but I was pretty big, and I ended up losing. Originally I lost about 40 pounds in 3 months by changing my diet and just eating healthy, and then eventually I lost about another 30 pounds. But what happened over the years was I started working out and building muscle, and so I sort of landed kind of in the 160 to 170, sometimes into the 170 plus range. And it really just depends on how much I work out and how much muscle I'm carrying. But that's kind of how the reason I went down that path was because I just didn't feel like conventional medicine was going to give me the odds that I wanted to be able to to live a long, happy life.
Okay, so you set your sights right away. Did you have a thought of like, okay, I'll try this approach for this amount of time, and then, if things aren't turning around, then I might consider, or did you just have your mind, your convictions set at the beginning of that journey, which I imagine, was that a pretty devastating diagnosis to receive?
It was, yeah. I mean, it was difficult, and even at a time when I would say I wasn't really strong in my faith. I mean, I was definitely walking with the Lord, but it wasn't. I feel like you always look back on. I'm 56 now. I was 29 when this happened, and so you always look back and you think, gosh, I feel like I wasn't as serious with the Lord back then as what I or maybe didn't know him as well, or have as much experience or whatever through life. But it was devastating. We were definitely praying about it together and trying to figure out what to do. The choice to go, the pathway that we took was not something that I ever envisioned any other option to.
Okay.
And here's the reason why. I became a laboratory of one. Over time, it took about a year, but over time, I could start to feel how my body felt when I would eat or drink things that weren't good for me. And I will say, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that know me or have known me through the years, I will say that what you knew of me maybe the first few years or the first 10 years is way different than what I believe now. being a laboratory of one and paying attention to how your body feels and responds to when you put certain things in it is huge, because you can learn from that to kind of gauge, like, okay, what did God really intend for us? And so that's kind of, it was all, we were all in. We didn't see any other options. I mean, to be clear, there was no internet back then, Lisa. It was just us. And we actually paid like $600 back then for a independent study to show us what options there were throughout the world for places that we could go and try to find some options. But yeah, there was no internet for us. There was no YouTube videos for us to go look at to see what other people had done. So my story is very unique. I know of no one else who had a stage 4 diagnosis, this long ago. It was 26 years ago now. And I know that we've had the incredible honor of carrying that torch and being a blessing to many people along the way, as I shared my story and we shared our story. And even though it's changed as we've gone along in terms of, what are the things that God actually intended us to eat, it's been an incredible journey.
And when you say we, you're referring to your wife, Nikki, and you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nikki and I, we really traveled this road together. And of course, we ended up having kids afterwards, and we raised them, and, very healthy, never did any kind of immunization or any kind of pharmaceuticals, always ate healthy. They were never sick, never up one night. They slept great. Their bodies physically are just specimens of health, and they had a great upbringing. They're in their 20s now, so I think they look back and appreciated what they've been given. And we don't take credit for that necessarily. We just feel like we're honored that God gave us this information at a time when not a lot of other people had it.
Yeah. What was this source you had for information on non-allopathic approaches to healing?
So the number one at the time, they're much less prominent now than what they were, is an organization called Hallelujah Acres. And I think their website is hacres.com. And they're still a great resource for lots of information. They're just not as active, I think, as what they once were. I also read a lot of books. I credit Dr. Russell Blaylock for his work. He had 2 books that were incredibly impactful for me. One was called Excitotoxins, which talks about excitatory additives, which is a whole nother thing that we could talk about. Is very interesting, which I think is a big deal for us to stay away from. And then he had another book called Natural Strategies for Cancer Patients. And I will say that it's funny, I just met a friend of Dr. Blaylock's last week, and I told him that I would really like to talk to him, because the one thing I would give him credit for is in the book, Natural Strategies for Cancer Patients, he breaks down a very technical and very complicated set of information and I'm an engineer, I have a pretty high IQ, but a lot of this stuff is over my head. And he breaks it down in that book to make it so understandable. And he helps to take the fear. I think that's one of the big things, is all these different things that I read and did help to take the fear out of these types of diagnosis. Another book I read was called The China Study, which was really good. Helped me a lot. To this day, I don't necessarily believe, I'm not in alignment with everything that they taught in that book. But that's pretty common as you go along. Jordan Rubin wrote a book that, it was funny because when I read it at the time, I didn't agree with a lot of it, but then over time I ended up agreeing with more of it. And so, it's just very interesting, but those were kind of some of the resources. But again, back then there was no internet, and eventually some documentaries started to come out. I remember Fast Food Nation, was Fast Food Nation one of the early ones? I think it was. Just different stuff like that, and books, and meeting people, and being in that sort of network, and having people contact me, and then watching other people not only get healthy, but also people that weren't able to get pregnant. They were able to change their diet and they were able to get pregnant, and watching that happen over and over again. Watching people lose weight. It was amazing. It was really, really a cool journey.
Wow, I'm glad you sought out and found such a wonderful community to be a support system and a source of turns out, life-saving information.
Absolutely.
Did you get a lot of pushback from friends and family when and even your medical team, when they found out you were not going to go down the allopathic road?
Yeah, one of our doctors was really upset with us to the point of actually yelling at us. That was our oncologist. I think his name was John Thompson, if I remember right. He was at the UW. Very angry guy. He got really upset with us. But to his credit, I think it was just because he believed in his modalities. So he had a lot of passion for it. The thing that bothers me is I went back after 10 years and I had written a book at that time about my story, and he wouldn't meet with me. So there's another doctor, David Bird, who helped us a lot, and he really encouraged us on this path. And, you know, because we saw him, we didn't do any treatments or anything, but we saw him like every 3 months for the first year. And I was losing weight, looked good, and really felt good and stuff. And he, behind closed doors, he would just tell us, like, keep doing what you're doing. You look great. Things are going great. In terms of friends and family, this is the interesting thing, Lisa. And I think this is good information for everyone. Certainly for people who may be facing a diagnosis now or at some point in the future. But also for people who have friends and family who do. What happened to us is we were abandoned. And we were abandoned for two reasons. Number one, when somebody that you know gets a deadly diagnosis or a terminal diagnosis, you tend to pull away from them. I think naturally we pull away because we don't know what to say. And we have this fear of the pain. You know, if we're too close, we might also hurt a little more. And then the other side of it is, which I mentioned, is sort of this side of like, you know, people don't know what to say, and they don't want to say the wrong thing, and so we felt very isolated. And then the other thing that happened was, you know, we made significant diet changes, and I was very militant about that, and it actually caused people to kind of not want to invite us because they were like, well, I don't know what they even eat. You know, like, you know, our social lives revolve around food. And so we became this amoeba a little bit. And so that was difficult. But
what do you mean amoeba?
Yeah, well, we were just, you know, we were like this weird, whatever, you know, we were the class.
Shape-shifting.
And yeah, but there's this interesting story, and I have to say this because it's still, you know, itches at me a little bit. We were going to this church, and this was years into our changes, and there was this one family, I think they had like 7 kids, and one of the kids was really acting out and just having all kinds of health problems and everything. And I happened to mention, was like, well, you know, maybe you guys, very, very lovingly, very kindly, you know, maybe you guys should take a look at his diet, you know. Oh my goodness. I just got reamed, like everybody piling on, like, why would you, you know, accuse them of having an unhealthy, you know. And I was just like, hey, why don't you just consider this, right? And then I even got like church discipline for it, which I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
Oh no, for saying that.
Then check this out. This social media comes along, and I don't know how many years it was later. It was probably 5 or 10 years later. I saw this story, same family, and they're like, you guys, we're so excited. You're not going to believe this. We finally found out what was wrong with our son, and man, we've got it mastered, and he's doing great. And guess what it was?
Diet.
They changed his diet.
Oh my
goodness. And it's like, and at no point did a single person from that church or that family call us to say, man, really sorry about that whole thing.
Oh,
you know?
Gosh.
Yeah. So
that was a painful experience.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you were glad the boy was okay, but just making a suggestion and being.
I wish that was the most painful thing that ever happened in my life, especially when getting into politics. Oh my goodness.
Of an ad hominem attack like that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I can handle it.
Yeah, you can handle it. I've heard you say before that all illness or dis-ease stems from either toxicity or deficiency. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's really plain. We're either we're either toxic in something or we're deficient in something else. And in 26 years, I have yet to be able to break that code, to be able to get someone to say like, no, that's not actually right. And so, in America, as a first world country, we tended to have more diseases that were related to toxicity because we live in excess, where a lot of third world countries, they have more diseases and things related to deficiency because they aren't getting the nutrients that they need. But in America, it's kind of shifted to where we actually have both, and that's the reason why the age of the sick people are coming down so much. Now, when you and I were kids, Lisa, how many children's hospitals were there around the country? And the reality is there were zero.
Really?
The coming of these children's hospitals, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar operation, maybe multi-trillion-dollar operation, is primarily because of diet and this degradation, and it all stems from either a deficiency or a toxicity. Every single thing that we face or that we deal with. Now, let me just address one pushback that a lot of people will state with regards to this, and that has to do with our propensity or our DNA or our family heritage in regards to, well, my grandfather had, heart disease, and my father had heart disease, and so I'm going to have heart disease. Like, not quite true. Now, I will say that we do have DNA propensities, like we may lean in a certain direction, we may be weaker in a certain direction, but it doesn't mean that you're destined for that thing. You're destined for that thing because you lived with your father, and your father lived with your grandfather, and you developed a lot of the same habits. And of course, you do have similar DNA, but it doesn't mean that you're stuck with that. It doesn't mean that's going to be your destiny. And so, as I look at my diet, like, for example, I compare that to Nikki, my wife. She grew up eating way worse than I did. The things that she ate were far less healthy than the things that I ate. So why was I the one that ended up with terminal cancer? And she's never even as much as had a cold. It seems a little odd, right? Well, my predisposition within my DNA put me in a spot where I was more susceptible to that, but it doesn't mean that it's a done deal. So all of our ailments, everything that we deal with, comes from either a deficiency, meaning we're not getting something that we need. Think of our body as a manufacturing plant. It's manufacturing new cells. It creates and builds a new body every year. That's how many of our cells get replenished every single day. And so we're either, trying to run that factory deficient of all the sub-assemblies and the different products that we need to be able to make healthy cells, or we have some kind of toxicity, like the air we breathe, maybe the water that we're showering or bathing in. I knew one man that would almost on a daily basis would take jet tub baths, and he didn't know it, but his jet tub was infected with this some sort of black mold or some kind of mold. And so every time he took a bath, he was like reintroducing that to his skin over and over and over again for a long time. Sometimes the lights that we're under, sometimes the people that we're around can be toxic. The relationships that we're in, our brokenness with God, our lack of submission to Jesus as our Savior, all those things can cause stress and toxicness within our bodies. And the things that we drink, maybe you smoke or put pharmaceuticals into your body or different things. Those are all toxins. Now, I'm not totally against pharmaceuticals. I think there are definitely some good uses for them. I just think we've gone to excess here in America. I mean, we're now at a spot where you don't even have to work to lose weight anymore. You can now just take a pill or an injection or something. We all talked about like that being the panacea, and that's kind of the American way. It's like, well, go have your junk food and then go take a pill so you can digest and sleep at night. It's like maybe there's some balance problems there.
Yeah, there's. It just takes hard work. There's no magic bullet.
For sure.
Let's see. A couple of things you said. You reminded me of Terry Walls. Is she the lady who had MS? Are you familiar with her?
I'm not.
Okay. She would talk about diet and intake, and she just took it down to such a basic level that I had never thought of before of, your body needs certain building blocks to function and to build its cells and organs. And if you're not bringing those in, it simply just doesn't have the parts it needs to construct
think
these.
about,
I mean, it's so basic, it almost goes
It
without
is,
saying, but I
but-
hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, just think about the supply chain. You know, I'm a manufacturing engineer, but think about the supply chain issues that we had during COVID, especially after COVID. And they had, you know, automotive manufacturing plants that were building cars and then going and parking them into a parking lot with basically lists of things on them that were missing.
Oh no.
They would continue the line building them, but they had to go back
Yeah.
later and install these missing parts. Well, your body doesn't have the ability to communicate to you and say, hey, I need a little magnesium here, you know, or whatever. You know, you have to feed. Your body is a living organism that is made by God, and God made the fuel that is supposed to go in it. And it's all kinds of agricultural products, everything from fresh, raw, organic produce to, you know, a brisket to, you know, I mean, this is the thing that I think is, if we can think more in terms of single ingredient foods. It doesn't mean that you can't have a handful of chips at a party or, you know, different things that are, you know, whatever. But I think our healthiest pathway, at least from what I've found in 26 years, our healthiest pathway is finding things that are single ingredient foods or things that we combine at home from single ingredient foods. And, you know, that's kind of the way I look at it now. And, you know, what we try to do today.
Yeah, you know what you're getting that way. Well, you've connected your health journey before, I've heard you, to what you call health freedom. How do you define that, Jerrod?
Well, I think that we ought to be able to choose our own path. If I didn't have the ability to choose my path, I probably wouldn't be here, because they would have injected me with interferon or chemotherapy or something. And the other part about it is the pathway that I took, it caused me to be more serious about my choices. I knew that it was on my shoulders. It was not going to be solved with some pill or some modality that the doctor was going to magically conjure up. It had to be my self-healing body that God gave me, and that's how I was going to get healed. And so I think that's a big deal. What we saw during COVID was a massive you know, human rights and civil rights violation, where they were basically forcing people to take, you know, medical intervention that hadn't been tested. They were ignoring things that have been on the market for many, many years, for decades, like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, for example, but there are many others. And the tough part about it is, you know, you start to think about some of these medicine men, you know, like from the Indian tribes or different things like that. There's a lot of truth to a lot of that stuff. It's pretty amazing. My wife has really gotten into essential oils over the last few years and even taken some classes on that. I mean, I had pink eye one time that we cured in hours with essential oils.
Oh, amazing.
And so
Yeah.
there's just so much for us to learn. And, you know, I think that's really important. But none of that would be possible if we did not have choice, if we did not have freedom, if we didn't have the anonymity to choose what we wanted. And by the way, that applies to parents making decisions for their children. I think the doctors should be our paid consultants to help us, but ultimately it's the parents and it's the adults who make the decisions for themselves and for their families.
Yeah, and I didn't know that your kids, you guys didn't give them any vaccines, and hats off to you. And you were, especially without the internet back then, how did you come to those decisions? Because you were light years ahead of me.
Well, a lot of it was what we learned through my diagnosis. And we actually met, I was invited to speak on Mackinac Island in northern Michigan at a week-long seminar. I only spoke one of the days, but there was a couple there from Florida. I don't even remember their name. But I remember they had written a book on vaccines, and they also were heavily into the autism relationship between vaccines and autism. And after sitting and listening to that, and actually our kids were already born at that time, so that must not have been the total catalyst, because we refused everything. We didn't do any of the schedule stuff during pregnancy other than just, vitamin supplementation. And then even when they were born, we didn't do any of that. And so it was just conviction. And honestly, it was not very popular back then. We had a lot of people. We ended up not mentioning it for many years because there were just so many people that were so against it, and they thought we were radical. We didn't feel radical at the time. We were just trying to raise a healthy family and trying to keep myself alive and get as many years out of this life that God has given us as we can. But now we talk about it openly. Our kids are grown, so and it worked out pretty good.
That's so wonderful. Oh, I'm so happy you don't have the regrets that some people like I do. What do you see as the appropriate role of the federal government in public health policy? And I realize that public health is that's a large term there. Yeah.
I personally think really my position on the federal government is no different in this category than it is in any other category for the most part. There are some things that the federal government need to help us with, and those are very clearly articulated in our Constitution. Especially one should consider the 10th Amendment, which really limits the federal government's reach. But in regards to our health, this is what I think, and I actually developed a solution for healthcare. It should be called disease care, but for healthcare in America. And what it really limits the federal government to is education, nutritional education. And it has to be actual nutrition. Like recently when under RFK Jr., they flipped the food pyramid upside down, and they actually got it much closer to being healthy than what it ever was before. I think that's about the limit. And then they ought to just leave it to the states are supposed to be the governors are actually supposed to be the most powerful people in the land. And the federal government is supposed to be tasked with keeping us safe, keeping us unified. So keeping us safe internationally, keeping us safe from each other in terms of one sovereign to another, one state to state. And that's about it. The federal government shouldn't be involved in so many things that they are. And so that's kind of my take on that. There's a lot more that we could discuss about that, but we need competition across state lines with regards to healthcare. It should be, people's choice as far as what they want to do, with their health. So anyway, we could talk about that for a long time, but that's kind of where I see the federal government's role is very limited.
Okay. And what you said made me bring to mind, I'm wondering now, I feel like digging out my Constitution, which part of it says that government is erected to secure the rights of the people?
Yeah, that's actually referenced Article 4 in the Constitution, but yeah, the government operates underneath our consent. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with the Constitution, the one fundamental thing that people have to realize is that our country is established on an understanding that God created us, God created the earth, and that God gave us inalienable rights, meaning they're rights that we cannot be separated from. So it's rights that are inherent in us because we are God made, because we are human. And they understood that when they wrote the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence is also quite telling in that regard. And so, of course, the Constitution is going to have protections in it that ensure that the government doesn't usurp that authority that we have individually. The entire purpose of the federal government is to protect our rights, not to rule over us in any sort of manner. And so that's very important for people to understand.
Yes. This might be a good time. I'm guessing, I'm sorry, I haven't read it yet, but you have a book that we mentioned at the top of the show. Does that further discuss what you're talking about here with respect to the federal government and states' rights?
It does some. So it's called How We Broke America. I'll let people see it here. So it became a bestseller. Yeah, bestseller.
When did you publish it?
This year. So yeah, I published it this year, and it became bestseller in like 3 weeks. So it's got 46
and tell
chapters.
Us the title, the full title, please.
It's called How We Broke America. How We Broke America and a
And-
Checklist to Fix It by Jerrod Sessler. Jerrod Sessler.
Nice.
How We Broke America and a Checklist to Fix It. And of course, you can get it on Amazon or wherever. You can also go to howwebrokeamerica.com. The whole point of this book is to talk about some of the serious mistakes or problems or mistakes that we have made in regards to America. This is not a book about health. But I will say that there are some sections where I talk about it. Chapter 38 is titled Rejecting False Food Narratives. Chapter 39 is Ending the War on Animal Fats, that started many, many years ago. And then chapter 40 is Reduce Processed Food Consumption, which is a huge issue for me as far as what I believe. And then 41 is Unleash Sunlight for vitamin D. Vitamin D is a strong cancer fighter. When I was diagnosed, they told me it was because I had too much sun exposure and then I needed to reduce my sun exposure and lather up. It was like, that was totally wrong. We never lather our kids up as they were growing up. The sun exposure helps your body to create vitamin D. Vitamin D is a natural cancer fighter. And in your eyes, by the way, you get 4 times the vitamin D production. Now, that doesn't mean you want to look right at the sun, but when you're out in the sunlight and you're squinting a little bit, that's actually good. Your eyes are taking in light and they have 4 times the sunlight or 4 times the vitamin D production ability. And then chapter 42 is banning excitotoxins, which are, again, Dr. Russell Blaylock's book titled Excitotoxins talks about sort of MSG, the monosodium glutamate, which is the mother of all excitotoxins. And those are, and again, those are later chapters in the book. I tried to write it based on priority. I'm not saying that the health of America isn't important, but America can be healthy without doing anything with our diet changes necessarily. Though a lot of the book is written about things that we need to do structurally in the country, like restoring election integrity, which is chapter 4, and abolishing the 16th and 17th Amendment, which are incredible blights on our history and have caused all kinds of problems. And the 16th Amendment alone is the number one reason why we have such an overweight and overextended federal government.
Remind us what the 16th Amendment is, please, Jerrod.
16th Amendment is the amendment that essentially allowed for the direct taxation out of your pay. So it allows the federal government to tax you directly from your pay. And that was enacted in 1913 in February.
Yes.
In December of 1913, they started the Federal Reserve. And so you have to think about this structurally. They took the opportunity to be able to take money directly from us with the 16th Amendment. And then later that same year, they enacted the Federal Reserve so that Congress, when they couldn't rob the people of enough money, they could go borrow it from the Federal Reserve and just keep on spending. That's how we ended up with almost $40 trillion in debt and a corruption machine that we have seen over this last couple of years, especially, is absolutely mind-blowing. The amount of money that is going through this corruption. And I'll say, I know on the opening part of the show, I saw that you had RFK Jr.'s book called The Real Anthony Fauci, which I read many years ago when it first came out. What an incredible book. And I'll tell you, Lisa, if you don't think the stuff in that book is true, then how come there's never been a lawsuit for it? It's all true. And one of the things that is pointed out in that book is that Anthony Fauci repeatedly went back to Congress asking for money to be able to solve the AIDS crisis, which, by the way, there was never a connection between AIDS and HIV, but they wanted money to try to solve it. And I would venture to say that of that $40 trillion, about $1 trillion of it is because of one person, and that person's name is Anthony Fauci. And it's because of all of the shenanigans that went on through the NIH and especially with the AIDS crisis and the money that he fleeced from the American people as a result of that.
Yeah. Would you, are you an advocate for ending the Fed? The Federal Reserve?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's a disaster. Okay. Yeah, it's terrible. They're obviously, we need some controls, and I think there are some really smart people out there in terms of, figuring that out. But the 16th Amendment is a bigger problem than the Federal Reserve. And what's even bigger problem than the Federal Reserve is lack of accountability by people that we send to Washington, D.C. And that's caused because we have primarily a voting bloc within the American people who don't understand what we the people stands for. They don't realize that we have the authority. We have to offer our consent for the government to continue for another day. And if we the people would stand up, the Federal Reserve could just be a useful tool. But instead, with this just complete out of hand spending, I mean, one statistic I know of is we spent $40 million for gender studies in Pakistan. For what? Why?
That sounds like such a cliche.
Yeah, show me who would vote for that among the American people, but somehow it got through Congress.
Yeah.
And so those are the kinds of things, like we just can't have this lunatic spending. We need to spend within our budget. And if we don't have the money, I'm sorry, we can't do it. You and I do the same thing at home and within our businesses, month after month, year after year, and somehow we're able to balance the budget. And if we don't, then we lose our home and we go out of business. And so why don't the representatives that we send to Washington, D.C. do the same thing? We need to have a balanced budget, period. That's more important than ending the Federal Reserve.
Okay. And when you were discussing your book a minute ago, I interrupted you. You were bringing up the 16th Amendment and I think the 17th.
Yeah, the 17th Amendment is when they changed the way that senators are elected. So every state has 2 senators. Every state has a number of representatives. So the House of Representatives is, except for a state like Wyoming, they don't have enough population, so they only have 1 representative. They have 2 senators. Most states have multiple representatives that go to the House. The House is called the lower chamber. The Senate is called the upper chamber. It doesn't mean they're more important. It just means they represent totally different things. The House is 435 members. They're like Washington State, where we're from. We have 10 representatives because there is approximately 750,000 people per per congressional district. So that's why when you see the census happen every 10 years, like what's coming up, California is going to lose a bunch of congressional seats because people are vacating California because of, the liberals' terrible policies there. And really same thing's happening in Washington. And so, so what happened is originally the lower house or the House is the people's house. It's like the Green Bay Packers. We vote for those people directly to represent us. I am running for Congress in Washington's 4th district. That's 4 of 10. We have 10 representatives in Washington. This is the most conservative district on the West Coast, and the voters get to directly choose who their representative is. Now, the Senate, on the other hand, is supposed to be picked originally by our state legislature. So we vote in by legislative district. We have 49 legislative districts in Washington State. We have 39 counties. So we send 2 state legislators from each of the 49 counties and 1 senator to Olympia to make laws for our state. Now that group is supposed to be responsible for picking who the 2 senators are that represent, get this, they don't represent the people. The 2 federal senators, the U.S. senators that go to Washington, D.C., they represent the sovereign state of Washington or whatever state you're from. Those 2 senators are not accountable to the people. They're accountable to the sovereign. They represent us as a state. And they are accountable.
How it used
accountable to our state legislature, not
to
the people.
Okay. They used to be.
So what happened in the 17th Amendment was they changed it so that so that our senators were elected by popular vote instead of by our state legislatures. Now, I'll just end with this. The reason why this is so important is because the voters, it gutted our state legislatures for 2 reasons. One, because the voters don't pay attention to who they send to their state capital because they don't pick the senators anymore. That's number 1. And number 2, the state legislature are supposed to be able to recall the senators if they don't follow what it is the state legislatures want them to vote on in Congress. The senators in D.C. are supposed to be proxy for the state legislatures. So that's the reason why the 17th Amendment is a disaster for America.
Okay. I've heard that before, but I always kind of forget the argument about why that was a bad idea, and then about the 17th Amendment, and then also that then the senators, the congressional senators are busy, just campaigning as opposed to really representing the
Right.
state that they're there
Yeah.
for. Okay, we have less than 10 minutes left, so let's switch gears if we can. I wish we had more time, Jerrod. I'd like to talk about agriculture, especially since you're from an area that is has that as such a high
Yeah.
part of its
Yeah,
its
we
productivity.
raise cattle on our ranch here, and we live right in the heart of agriculture here in Central Washington. It's watered by the Columbia Basin Project and obviously the Yakima River, and all of our neighbors are farming and agricultural folks.
Yeah, and you're aware of these pesticide liability shield bills that are being, well, I guess a couple of them in a couple of states have passed. This kind of reminds me, well, tell our listeners, if you don't mind, because I know you're well versed in this, what these pesticide liability shield bills attempt to do, and then your position on those.
Yeah, I think we can kill two birds with one stone here, but we can use the example of the big pharma liability shield with regards to vaccines, which we should undo. They should not have the liability. They just shouldn't. And it's the same thing with our pesticides. There's no reason why these companies should have liability. And it's only because they're spending millions of dollars in Washington, D.C. to lobby the legislators, the lawmakers there, to give them this shield. And same thing with the states. Indiana last week just introduced one of these. I think Wisconsin was the one that passed one last year, but I could be wrong on which state that was. But yeah, we should not have these. And again, this goes back to us choosing who our representatives are that are willing to go and serve the public, not serve themselves. And what happens when these legislators get basically bought by these lobbyists is they start making decisions that affect their pocketbook instead of affecting what's best for we the people. There is absolutely no justification for liability shield for these pesticide manufacturers. And to me, the idea of an immunity stick, other than maybe on what's that show where you can win immunity on, there's all these reality shows now, you can get immunity as a contest, right? But they don't belong in real life. Like that's just not right. You cannot give companies immunity, period. Especially when you're dealing with something like our diet.
Yeah, these companies have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders, and if there's no drawback to poisoning people, why should they go to the extra trouble to minimize that or mitigate it?
Yeah, the other thing that people have to realize is that food manufacturers basically have two rules. Number one is it can't kill the person that eats it immediately. It can kill them over time, but it can't kill them immediately. Number two is it has to be profitable. And so that's, again, the reason why I don't have anything against, these food manufacturers. I think we ought to do a lot better with our food ingredients. I think there are, different types of food that can be manufactured and is okay to be manufactured. It's probably okay to eat, but we ought to get rid of these ingredients that are killing us. And I think that's what RFK Jr.'s real legacy. I think that's what he wants it to be. And I applaud him. I wish that we had more Democrats like him in this country once again. And I actually think we do. I just think that there is a faction from the Democrat Party that is very loud and crazy. And so that's my take on that. And we just cannot we can't continue down that path.
Yeah. What do you see as the responsibility of Congress when it comes to agricultural chemicals and liability protections, if any?
Yeah, well, again, I'm against the liability protections. I believe that the Congress in regards to that could be informative so that they could force the truth to be able to be known. But ultimately, the practices and the policies have to be pushed to the states. That's just the way it is. And the federal government can be and should be a backstop for overreaching states, especially states like Washington that have gone full-blown socialist and tyrannical. We have to have, we live in a dual federalist state, and so we are both simultaneously Washingtonians while we are also Americans. And so we are both simultaneously in Washington state and in America, and we have protections from constitutions at both levels, and we have protections from through legal means at both levels. And so I think that gives us an added ability protection. And the more mandates and laws that come from the federal government, the less control that we have on a local level and the less backstop we have as individuals.
Yeah. Okay, Jerrod, we only have about 2 minutes left. And can I ask you, well, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share about, especially about health freedom and your policy position that we didn't already cover?
No, I think we covered it. I mean, there's so much more, Lisa, as you know, we could talk for hours on this. There's just so much. I mean, 26 years of knowledge and learning. And trust me, for everyone that's listening, I will tell you, I have failed 5 times for every single time that I've succeeded. I probably failed 10 or 15 times for every single time I've succeeded. So don't think that, what I'm saying is just some magical pathway. It's what we learn through blood, sweat, and tears. And I will just say that, my desire to get into politics is very selfless. I have a great life. I have a beautiful wife. I have 3 amazing kids in their 20s. I have a granddaughter now who we are just smitten about. We could spend all day just looking at her. I've been financially successful. We have a beautiful piece of property on the Yakima River in Eastern Washington. I mean, life is grand. We do not need our names to be dragged through the mud or to have people lying about me or screaming at me or threatening to kill me or all this stuff. But I think that part of the problem is that we have so many people that are not willing to stand up and to step into this political space, that we don't get the really good, talented, smart, intelligent people who are like, my age, who've been through some stuff, served in the military, graduated from college, lived a life, beat a terminal diagnosis, raised a family, got married, loved Jesus. These are all positive attributes for things that we really want in our elected. And I'm standing up because nobody will. And the people that do stand up, I'm just telling you, Lisa, I know a lot of them, both in our state and in Washington, D.C. A lot of them are just dumb as a box of rocks, and they don't have a lot of life experience. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. They just don't know what they're doing. And so they get led around on a leash by these lobbyists or their staff. And people want to know, like, well, why is Mitch McConnell still there? Because that's where half the offices back there operate. These people just get led around, and then they go back to the district, and it's a dog and pony show there with photo ops and different. And it's like, what are they actually doing for the people? I want somebody that's going to represent us, going to fight for us, and that really, when the rubber meets the road, would rather do something else, as I would. But this is the right thing to do, and we've got to have more people standing up for public office that are willing to step into this zone and to do the right thing for the American people.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing. People, we just scratched the surface of what Jerrod's positions. And there's his book, How We Broke America. Thank you, Jerrod, for coming on. I hope you enjoyed your time. I appreciated having time with you. Thanks to our producer, Nathan Miller.
Anybody, reach out to me anytime. I'm most active on Twitter @Sessler, Sessler, and happy to answer questions for people.
Okay. Thank you for tuning into Informed Life Radio on 1150 AM, KKNW and CHD TV. This is Lisa Templeton signing off for the week. Bernadette will be back soon. Here's to embracing your informed life.
Informed Choice Washington is a nonprofit organization that advocates for healthy immunity, medical freedom, and fully informed medical consent. The right to make medical choices without coercion is fundamental to our civil liberties and a basic principle in all human rights declarations. To learn more, tune in each Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. to An Informed Life Radio and visit the website informedchoicewa.org. It's time to take a stand for medical freedom. Go to informedchoicewa.org today.
Did you know that solutions containing iodine can inactivate viruses in the nose and throat in 15 seconds? And hydrogen peroxide can do it in under 30 seconds. Decades of studies, including many conducted during COVID, have shown that properly prepared and used nasal spray and gargling solutions can reduce your risk of infection, reduce viral load, reduce symptoms, and reduce transmission of viruses. To learn more, go to healthyimmunitynow.org and check out the EFU Challenge. Why spread fear and infection when nature provides solutions? Go to healthyimmunitynow.org today.
The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.